those two. If anything happens, I love you. Will McCormick and Michael Godier.
We dedicate this film to all those who've lost loved ones to gun violence. We deserve better than to live in a country where more than 100 people die by gun violence every single day. We deserve better, we must do better, we will do better.
Filmmakers Will McCormick and Michael Godier received the 2021 Oscar for the Best Animated Short Film for their animated movie If Anything Happens, I Love You. The story revolves around two grieving parents as they struggle to confront the death of their daughter, who was killed in a school shooting. Gun violence is a leading cause of premature death in the United States, yet the United States is awash in firearms.
Oh my God. Can I get this person Baby, this is horrible. Oh my God.
Although the United States has the worst rate of gun violence among all developed countries, it has become a grim reality in other countries too. According to gunpolicy.org, the global death toll from the use of guns may be as high as 1,000 dead each day. You may be surprised to hear that 75% of the world's 875 million guns are civilian-controlled. 48% of these guns are in the United States, which has the highest rate of gun ownership in the world. With educational institutes shut due to the coronavirus pandemic, there was a reprieve from school shootings. But with students in many US states returning to their classrooms, there has been an uptick in gun violence. On May 9th, a man opened fire at a birthday party in Colorado, killing 6 people before shooting himself. On May 6th, a 6th grade girl opened fire in an Idaho school, injuring 3 people before being disarmed by a teacher. A series of mass shootings was reported on the weekend of May 23rd, killing at least 11 people and injuring 69. In just 3 days, the shootings took place across 8 states: Illinois, New Jersey, Ohio, Indiana, South Carolina, Virginia, Texas, and Minnesota. According to data from the Gun Violence Archive, in 2020, gun violence killed nearly 20,000 Americans. An additional 24,000 people died by suicide with a gun, more than any other year in at least 2 decades. And this year, over 7,500 people have already died from gun violence in the country. In April, US President Joe Biden branded gun violence in America as an epidemic and an international embarrassment.
Thank you very much. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
Biden even called for a ban on military-style weapons and large ammunition clips in private hands, but none of his measures are going to affect the Second Amendment.
Today we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake from what we're talking about.
Second Amendment. These 2 words have been shaping American politics for years now. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution protects the right to keep and bear arms. Ratified on December 15, 1791, it was a part of the first 10 amendments of the United States, called the Bill of Rights. The concept of such a right existed within English common law long before the enactment of the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment states, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." It was created to give American citizens the opportunity to fight back against a tyrannical federal government. But in the 20th century, the definition of the amendment seemed to have changed forever. Be it the assassination of African-American civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4, 1968, or killing of the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who was fatally shot on November 22, 1963. The amendment has become increasingly more controversial. In October 1968, following these 2 high-profile killings, the GunControl Act was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. It banned mail-order sales of rifles and shotguns and prohibited most felons, drug users, and people found mentally incompetent from buying guns. Even aliens were listed under the act. However, in 1986, the Congress passed the so-called Firearms Owners Protection Act that undid many of the provisions in the 1968 Gun Control Act. The NRA, or National Rifle Association, calls it the law that saved gun rights in America. The bill allowed dealers to sell rifles, shotguns, and ammunition through the mail and later the internet. In 1993, President Bill Clinton, an advocate of gun control, signed the Brady Handgun Control Bill into law. The law requires a prospective handgun buyer to wait 5 business days while the authorities check on his or her background, during which time the sale is approved or prohibited based on an established set of criteria. But it had no discernible effect on reducing gun deaths. These are some heart-wrenching scenes from critically acclaimed 2003 film Elephant. The psychological drama takes place in the fictional Watt High School in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, and chronicles the events surrounding a school shooting. based in part on the 1999 Columbine High School massacre in Columbine, Colorado. The perpetrators of this shooting were 12th grade students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. They murdered 12 students and 1 teacher. 10 students were killed in the school library, where the duo eventually killed themselves after conducting this heinous crime. 21 additional people were injured by gunshots. The motive? FBI concluded that the killers were victims of mental illness. Harris was a clinical psychopath and Klebold was depressive. You will be shocked to know that these teenagers used weapons like the Intratec Tech 9 Mini, Hi-Point 995 carbine, Savage 6.7 pump-action shotgun, Stevens 311D double-barreled sawed-off shotgun, 99 explosives, and 4 knives. A total of 188 rounds of ammunition were fired by the perpetrators during the massacre. At the time, it was the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history.
The shooters entered the library. You could hear the first shots coming into the library. And at that moment, I felt like I got punched in the stomach. It was like this rolling feeling across the floor, and I felt so sick to my stomach. And I just started praying. And I just prayed, God help us. And the boys were yelling, shooting, pipe bombs were going off, they were laughing, they were telling us all this was our day to die.
Following the Columbine shooting, schools across the United States adopted a zero-tolerance approach to possession of weapons. The incident also sparked debates of teenage use of pharmaceutical antidepressants, the growing influence of internet, and violence in video games and movies. New security measures such as see-through backpacks, metal detectors, school uniforms, and security guards were instituted in several schools across the nation. The traumatizing incident changed the way schools functioned in America, and Columbine became a byword for school shootings. On July 20th, 2012, a mass shooting occurred inside a Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, United States, during a midnight screening of the film The Dark Knight Rises. Dressed in tactical clothing, mass murderer James Egan Holmes set off tear gas grenades and shot into the audience with multiple firearms.
When I tried to crawl out, I saw all these dead bodies. There was a dead girl in the stairwell. There was all these people leaning over the chairs. There were kids.
12 people were killed and 70 others were injured, 58 of them from gunfire. It was the deadliest shooting in Colorado since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. And how can we forget this tragic event? On the evening of October 1st, 2017, Stephen Paddock, a 67-year-old man, opened fire upon the crowd attending the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival on the Las Vegas Strip in Nevada. Within 10 minutes, he fired more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. 60 people were killed, and he wounded 411 by gunfire. Paddock was later found dead in his room from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. His motive remains officially undetermined. According to reports, he had modified some of his guns to work like automatic weapons, like machine guns, able to shoot many hundreds of rounds a minute with one trigger pull. But how did a lone gunman amass an arsenal of firearms? In the United States, and particularly in states like Nevada, it's easy and legal. Anyone can build a cache of rifles. Most gun sales are by federally licensed vendors who must put buyers through background checks. The FBI runs their name through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, which refers to 3 databases of offenders. However, those databases are not always perfect. In the case of Paddock, there were no red flags. He was able to buy as many guns as he wanted. The incident is regarded as the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in modern United States history. It was a turning point in American gun culture. It renewed attention on firearm laws in the United States, particularly with regard to bump stocks, which Paddock used to fire shots in rapid succession, at a rate of fire similar to automatic weapons. Bump stocks were eventually banned in the United States by March 2019. These regulations have always been a topic of heated debate in the Supreme Court.
My brain wouldn't even comprehend the possibility of gunshots. And then he came into the store and started firing, and people were just saying run, and we were all saying run. We just bolted.
This is Paul Johnson, a survivor of a mass shooting that occurred at a King Soopers supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, United States, on March 22nd. Ahmad Alissa, a 21-year-old suspect, was accused of shooting dead 10 people and taken into custody. As he shared his condolences after the deadly mass shooting, President Joe Biden urged Congress to pass new gun restrictions. But soon after, this happened. On April 15th, a former FedEx employee fatally shot 8 people and wounded several others at the delivery company's facility in the U.S. city of Indianapolis before killing himself. Despite all this, the National Rifle Association continues to campaign against all forms of gun control in the U.S. and argues that more guns make the country safer. While the share of Americans who favor stricter gun laws has increased since 2017, Republicans have long stood against what some view as any infringement on their right to bear arms. Texas, the second largest U.S. state by both area and population, is poised to remove one of its last gun restrictions. The Republican-dominated legislature approved the measure. It will allow people to carry handguns without a license, and the background check and training that go with it. Supporters of the bill say it would allow Texans to better defend themselves in public while abolishing unnecessary impediments to the constitutional right to bear arms. Once signed into law, Texans will join nearly 24 other states that allow some form of unregulated carry of a handgun, and by far the most populous.
Experts believe the US could learn a thing or two from Australia's gun control laws. In 1996, Martin Bryant, then 28 years old, went on a killing spree in Port Arthur, a tourist town on the island of Tasmania. 35 people were killed and another 28 wounded. Soon after this incident, Australia enacted the National Firearms Agreement, which banned the use of all semi-automatic rifles, shotguns and pump-action shotguns. The government also mandated that all gun owners provide authorities with a reason for possessing a firearm, register all weapons with authorities, and undergo a safety training. The country also brought in a gun buyback program that took more than 600,000 weapons out of private hands. Its neighbor, New Zealand, too, was forced to tighten gun laws in response to a tragedy. March 15th, 2019. 2 consecutive mass shootings occurred at mosques in a terrorist attack in Christchurch during a Friday prayer. The sole attacker managed to kill 51 people and injured 40. The perpetrator, Brent Harrison Tarrant, was arrested shortly afterward in Australia. He was described in media reports as a white supremacist and part of the alt-right. He had live-streamed the first shooting on Facebook and prior to the attack had published an online manifesto. Both the video and manifesto were subsequently banned in New Zealand and Australia. New Zealand soon introduced legislation that banned the type of guns used in the attacks, It is also interesting to note that Prime Minister Lucinda Ardern used her executive power immediately to prevent sales of the banned weapons to keep people from stockpiling. Another country which has a strict policy on gun laws is Japan. And now the world's toughest gun control laws are posing unusual problems at the Tokyo Olympics. From the coach who can't touch a firearm to strict limits on ammunition. Olympic organizers have had to blast through red tape to prepare for the games.
We are required to have a special locker to keep the gun in and to make sure to store it there when we are not using it. And the locker itself has to be fixed to a wall so that the entire storage unit cannot be stolen. In case somebody could break the locker and steal the gun, we have to disassemble it when storing it, with some key parts kept in different places to prevent the gun from being reassembled illegally.
The annual deaths from firearms in the country of 125 million people are regularly in single figures.
Getting a gun license is a long and complicated process. Applicants must first get a recommendation from a shooting association and then undergo strict police checks.
Shooting athletes aged 10 or older can use a gun owned by an instructor, and once they're in high school, they're allowed to own an air gun. But before a child is given permission, a detective will go around their neighborhood gathering information to find out what kind of kid they are.
Russia was rocked by a shooting incident on May 11th this year. At least 9 people, most of them children, were killed when a lone teenage gunman opened fire at a school in the central Russian city of Kazan. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a review of gun control laws after the shooting, one of the worst in recent Russian history, which occurred on the first day back to school following annual May holidays. Gun violence is a hidden war. It takes a heavy toll on the young. Apart from banning measures, what can states do to prevent gun violence? Several people across the globe are working furiously to eradicate this epidemic.
The topic of the day is the role of policy and how you can influence gun laws.
Meet Jennifer Ngobeni, a not-so-ordinary radio announcer from South Africa. She is leading a group of young reporters from the Alexandria township in Johannesburg who are hoping to tackle this scourge in a rather peculiar way by producing and hosting their own radio show. In a country where people aged between 18 and 21 die due to gun violence every day, such programs are a beacon of hope.
Gun violence, it's something that people in Alexandria have tend to normalize, which is not a good thing. So us talking about gun violence actually helps make people realize and makes them gain conscious that it's not okay for someone to be killed with a gun.
Several awareness programs are being conducted across the United States and the rest of the world to stop this menace. Many students have taken matters into their own hand and want to solve America's school shooting problem. Parents, too, are leading anti-gun campaigns in a bid to help people affected by this form of extreme violence.
My kids shouldn't be scared to go to school at all, and no kid should.
There seems to be a culture in the United States that hasn't been very taking a lot of responsibility for ones who decide to take lives, innocent lives, at home. It's a domestic terrorism.
Enough is enough. We need to make sure that we have sensible gun laws that prevent mentally ill from having access to weapons they should not have.
Fear, fury, and most of all, the pain of loss. As world leaders offer comforting words and pledge to tighten gun laws, the question remains, when will these words turn into action?
well, look, it's not going to be signed in time, at least according to the timeline that the White House and US President Joe Biden had. They wanted this bill of comprehensive police reform to be... just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The hidden war of gun violence can only be ended with a sustained effort at all levels. But it's time to say enough is enough.